Hello, everyone. Welcome to another TechStrong Learning event. I'm Alan Schimmel, the CEO founder of TechStrong. Thanks for joining us today. We have, this happens to be one of my areas in security I like to dive into. So I think we're going to have a great discussion today. And we also have a first-time sponsor sponsoring us today. I want to, first of all, introduce the topic. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how your role as the audience will play into this today. And then lastly, I'll introduce our great panel and we'll dive into things. So first of all, I hope you signed up for the right webinar. This webinar is how are you protecting your company from API security breaches? And if you don't know, hopefully you're going to learn how to today. But I will tell you that this is something that is really, really important. You have to get in front of when 71%, up to 71% of all internet traffic today is API calls. You've got to be smart about your API security. Now, what I love about this format is I'm not here giving you a bunch of slides. We're not some talking heads with slides. This is a real roundtable today, and I've got 3 experts to talk with me. But beyond that, I have all of you out there to talk as well. You know, we use the Big Marker webinar system, and the reason I like it is, number one, it works in the browser without a plugin or nothing. It's real easy to use. But number 2 is, for most of you on the right-hand side of your browser, you're going to see what we call the Big Marker communication window. It's fantastic. You'll see for most of you that chat is in big black letters, and underneath that it'll say public, private, Twitter. Forget the Twitter. We're not going on Twitter or X today. But that public chat is just that. It's a public chat where you can come on and you can participate in today's webinar. Whether you're asking a question, commenting on something someone said, or have some other kind of information you want to add to the mix, use that public chat to put it out. The only thing I will warn you is whatever you put out there, everyone sees. So don't put out anything that you're going to be sorry that everyone saw. But other than that, please use it. As a matter of fact, to make sure it works for you, you could see I've already asked some of the folks to put in hello from wherever you are in the world. You know, I've been on the internet 30 years, almost 30 years. And it still kind of amazes me when we do these kinds of things, where everyone comes from. So we have people, you know, from Israel and to New Mexico to Chicago and Denver, but we have Finland and New Hampshire, Las Vegas, everywhere. So please take a minute. Let's hear where you're from. And it's an interesting thing. But more importantly, make sure your chat works. So now you've all chatted once. I expect you to chat more. And by the way, someone in the audience asks a question and you think you know the answer, or you want to comment on their question or comment, feel free to do that too. You guys are part of the panel. You're not just the audience. Secondly, on this communications window, I want to point you to, next to the word chat, for most of you it'll be grayed out, it's Q&A. If you have something that you want the panel to take up, you want me to uplift it to the panel and get the panel's thoughts on it, that's your place. Type it in there and we will get you right on it. So chat public, chat Q&A. I discourage people from using the private chat because, you know, this isn't a dating site or anything like that. And people don't necessarily take the private chat. So use public. All right. So that's out of the way. Again, please tell us where you're from. We're interested to hear. Let me next introduce you to our panel. First of all, today's webinar is sponsored by a company called Pynt. They're fairly new to our audience, I think, but they've been around a long time, and the people behind it have been in security a very long time, and that is PYNT. Check them out. We have joining us today the co-founder of Pynt and CEO, my friend Zvika Schneider. Zvika joins us from Tel Aviv. For now, he'll be in California at RSA conference next week. But Zvika, welcome. Why don't you give people a little bit of your background and a little bit of the Pynt story?
Thank you, Alan, and appreciate the intro. So hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Vika Schneider. I'm co-founder, CEO of Pynt. Um, we're a company less than 2.5 years old, but we did a lot of noise with what we did with some of the community and the security. Pynt is all about shifting left API security testing. Is all about actually, taking the harsh problem in security to actually start with the development phase and the developers and making it very easy and elegant to fix. This is our vision in Pynt. Few words about myself. So prior to starting Pynt, I was heading the cybersecurity division at Harman International, a very known firm in the automotive industry. Um, so I had a division there, and before that, I I was heading few startups in cloud and in virtual sim, different domains. And before that, I was had kind of a long service in the intelligence force in Israel IDF, mainly around cybersecurity. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to talk, with you, Ellen, and all the experts about the problem API security. Everybody, just as a teaser for next, everybody talks about API security. Everybody knows about it. It's well known, but still, the problem is there, alive and kicking, and we're here to talk what we can do differently to make sure it we really solve the problem.
Absolutely. And speaker, just real quickly, the website for Pint.
Yeah, so our website is Pint.io. I will share it here in the chat.
Thank
Um,
you.
Please, feel free, go see the product, add feedback, and contact us.
Excellent. Let me introduce you to our next panel member. We announced about 2 weeks ago we're joining up with the Futurum Group. It's one of the leading analyst research firms in the world today. I think they're the fourth or fifth largest analyst firm by revenue at this point. I have lucky enough to have two of my friends from Futurum joining us. Thank them. First, let me introduce you all the way from New Hampshire. It's also going to be in RSA next week. Krista McCumber. Krista, welcome. Thank you. Why don't you give people a little bit of your background?
Sure, sure. Thanks so much for the great introduction, Alan. It's definitely exciting that TechStrong is kind of joining the Futurum family, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you, Svika and Paul as well. So just kind of a little bit on my personal background. I'm a research director and a senior analyst on the team at Futurum Group, and I'm covering a little bit of everything related to cybersecurity and cyber resiliency these days. And kind of building on Svika's comments, certainly we're hearing quite a bit about API security. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. And in particular, data security is kind of near and dear to my heart. So much of my commentary will likely be kind of funneled through that lens, if you will.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Krista. And then joining us, Paul, are you out west today? Or
I am in North Carolina today.
you had to look around to make sure where you were, huh? Joining us from North Carolina, my friend Paul Nashawati. Paul, why don't you introduce yourself?
Alan, always a pleasure. So thank you. And, this is really exciting. I'm really happy to be on this webinar because, first and foremost, Paul Nashawati, as Alan said, I'm the practice lead for the app dev and app modernization practice at the Futurum Group. And, when I look at what I cover day zero, day one, day two. So build, release, and operation. So everything in the CI/CD pipeline, the SDLC, everything that kind of impacts that. But DevSecOps, clearly an area that overlaps the whole CI/CD pipeline, and API security with the explosion of what's happening with AI and LLMs and transactions. Alan, you mentioned right at the top that 71% of transactions to the internet go through APIs. This is, Pynt is on to something big here, right? We definitely need a better way to manage this and watch it. So I'm really excited about this, what we're doing here, and I hope the audience really gets a lot out of this. So looking forward to this chat.
Absolutely. So guys, before we dive in, I've got a quick poll I'm going to throw up here in a second. Before I do, though, as I mentioned, API security is something I've been interested in now for a number of years, because for too long it was a best kept secret in security. everybody was focused on AppSec and shift left, but this whole API thing kind of snuck up in that people weren't aware 71% of traffic is API calls. People weren't aware that traditional DAST and SAST and, you know, the old tools that were looking for old things really don't work with APIs. And the biggest thing that I found personally was that people didn't even know what APIs they have. So how the heck can you defend what you don't even know you have? You want to talk about defining an attack surface? I think things are a little better over the last 3-4 years. People at least have heard about API security. But I want to ask our audience, and guys, these polls are only as good as your answers. So please, this is a quick question. It shouldn't take you more than a second. But hopefully you're seeing this out there, right? Do you currently have an API security solution that you use in your organization? Really simple. So guys, take your time. Don't take your time. It shouldn't take that long. Can we get, come on, 2 people voted. How about more people here? All right, we're getting some answers in here. We're starting to see. And it pretty much shows what I thought. Twice as many are saying no as yes. So again, more than twice as many. I'm going to close it because I think I made my point. Right? Twice as many, 2/3 of people say no, they do not have an API security solution.
Yeah, just maybe for Sherry question. So I think WAF doesn't count as an API.
Right. And how many of those who said yes said WAF, right? That's a good point. But that's also, let's explore that a little, Svika. Why isn't WAF an API security solution?
So, WAF is like a web application firewall.
Yes.
If we'll take, a couple years back, like 10, 20 years, when we talk about, like even, I would say, like the 7 layers, right? So back then you had like a firewall, right? You blocking a port and an IP address. And then, things moved more from the infrastructure to software a bit, the web. So you need to have kind of an application firewall that kind of look on more of the payload than just the IP and the port, than the actual network access. And WAF was there for a long, long time. It's there for a long time, and it was kind of pretty stable. But WAF doesn't have any context. It doesn't really look on the payloads. It doesn't have the context of the last call and the next call, etc. This is why many companies that did WAF, or a new API security companies that focus on runtime production, they got born. And with the claim of why WAF is not enough, right? Because like it's not enough to actually say the data. Very, very basic, web security. So what we see, the solution today are more based on a lot of data, anomaly detection, etc. Things that you cannot get with a traditional WAF. And I think this is in general, you talked, Alan, before about that people don't know where their APIs. They were not aware that most of the internet are APIs. So let me start with like a very strong statement here. The world runs on software. Software runs code. Code talk to each other. Code with API. So, and also to other applications or other businesses. So everything is around API today. I mean, most of the businesses, API is the main trigger to actually use the business and expose services to other companies, to our users. So come back to to finalize that answer. So WAF is not enough because it doesn't look on the context, it doesn't understand the payload, and it's a very, very basic and important that was relevant before.
Yeah, there's also kind of the concept of, I agree with everything you said. The devils are in the details, right? But when you look at where organizations are struggling, there's skill gap issues, there's resource issues, and most CIOs are tasked with, they have to modernize, right? They try to go much faster than they really should. And a former colleague of mine used to tell me, in the security space, it's far faster to go slower to go faster, right? You really need to look at what you're doing. I mean, we all know that API security is not new, and it's actually a known issue for a lot of people, right? A lot of organizations. But when they look at these release cycles, DevOps trying to push code out the door, we see in our research that 24% of organizations want to release code on an hourly basis, yet only 8% are able to do so. And they're dealing with the challenge of making things go out the door faster, but they're exposing all these challenges and risks as they're pushing code out the door fast. So business KPIs need to align to security protocols as well.
Yeah, and I'd love to just piggyback on that, quickly, so to speak. And Paul, your comments really resonate. So I do spend a lot of time looking at kind of general trends around cybersecurity and attacks. And there was kind of two things that really resonated with me. So kind of, Paul, you painted this picture of developers needing to kind of move very quickly and with agility. And at the same time, we see that the attack landscape is changing all the time, especially now that attackers have access to artificial intelligence. And so, I know one thing I believe Svika kind of commented on was, obtaining context, right? When we look at kind of a, kind of a security testing or kind of threat intelligence tool. And that's why that context becomes so important, is so that way we can, stand a chance in terms of being able to keep up with these attackers. And then secondly, is just kind of, Svika, I know you commented as well regarding kind of getting that comprehensive view into the API landscape of the particular organization. And we can't protect what we don't know we have, right? So whether we look at application security, infrastructure security, this concept of your threat posture and kind of getting that inventory as well, these are critical, trends today that we're seeing to be able to kind of improve that resiliency against these attacks.
I mean, I would say, look, I'm not here knocking WAFs, right? One of the things I've learned as I've grown older is having the right tool for the job makes all the difference. But the WAF's not the right tool for the API security job. Because most of that API traffic is kind of invisible to the WAF. It's just traffic. It has no way of providing context to know what to do with it. So if you want to use a WAF as your web application firewall and not have anything, and you have something else for API security, great. But here's the bigger issue to me too, though. You can't fight the next war with the last war's technology, right? We've seen this in every war since the Germans, the French in World War II, right? The Maginot Line, and the Germans came around it. We see it in Ukraine today, right? A1 Abrams tanks, drones coming on top, knocking out some of the best tanks in the world. Same thing goes on here. WAF is the last war's tool. You need this war's tools. Secondly, the battlefront has shifted. WAF is great when you've already got an application out there that people are using or that there's traffic going on the internet around. But today, the battlefront is making sure my app is designed securely and working securely before it's deployed. In my day, when I started security companies, it was all about doing vulnerability scanning of your infrastructure. But now we do that scanning of the application before we deploy it. My platform engineers are setting up guardrails so that we are, the focus is on that shift left battle. And speak of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where Pynt fights it. That's the battlefield for Pynt, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the battlefield for Pynt. We are focused on the very hard security issues, but to be able to solve them already, very close to the development phase, to the actual development. And let's talk about shift left just for a bit here. So the trend of shift left, whoever, by the way, is not aware of it. So shift left is taking like best practices. We used to do more on the right, which is like we start from the left and you go to the right as a process. So earlier in the process some best practices. But if we kind of like analyze it in the last 25 years, 20 years, so we can clearly see that, the world start with shift left QA. Back then, 20 years ago, we had the VP QA reporting to the CEO. I think, a few years after, QA is in the R&D, outside R&D. We have some agile and other development methodologies, etc. Um, and in the end result is that in some point of time, the whole weight on the developer is, hey, you are responsible as developer for quality before quantity. You sometimes you need even to write tests before the actual code and logic. So that thing like pretty shifted left, like the developer responsible for the quality. Let's talk about another thing, like it's about DevOps. Like DevOps, it's like a word, and then you guys are very close to this. Like it's a new thing we invented around 2008, and around then, when we had like developers, they didn't want to do some IT work, and IT administrator didn't know how to develop, and we needed something in like kind of an enablers in the middle. But even now, take 10 years after, 12 years after, you see developers are doing a lot of DevOps on their side. They talking about CI/CDs and Jenkins and Docker containers and virtual machines and working with a cloud, etc. So that's all. You don't have, I would say, in most spaces today, like beefy DevOps, right? It's part of engineering. So in the end, security is going there 100%. Maybe the main difference will be that in security you have, the compliance, and someone that need to own the compliance and regulations. So here you might have still manager, but the actual responsibility in the work is shifting left because there's no other way. Because today, I think maybe less than a couple years ago, it's less about the actual infrastructure and I left that port open and etc. It's more about the software and what the software enables me as a hacker to get from that organization. So if we're talking about software in the end, so it also start from the developer. So now this is why we see, the hype and the trend about shifting left, and we help developers secure and developers loves, etc. But the thing is, it's nice to say, it's hard to do because developers, they have like zero intent for security. And maybe Paul, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is really interesting. You both brought up really good points, and what I like about where you started the conversation about, using last year's tech or previous tech to do something. That's where a lot of organizations kind of get stuck, right? When we look at these, the shifting left activity and making sure that security is earlier in the development cycle, in the day zero and day one part of the development cycle, it makes a lot of sense. But the other factor that we have to take into consideration, this is where I think Pynt really kind of excels here, right? This, like when we look at our research, we see that 65% of organizations have more than 50 Git repositories, right? So the developers are putting out all of these code sources, and they're pulling code from everywhere, right? So the traditional ways of doing API security testing, of just kind of doing a discovery and have limited inventory and not understanding what's out there, versus a fully automated kind of API discovery, understand classifications and comprehensive API cataloging, that is critical to the sprawl. So when you start looking at these, heritage tools, those heritage tools that people were using don't work in today's, growth and sprawl of application development. And frankly, this isn't slowing down. I mean, with the introduction of AI and introduction of acceleration, we see that, again, in our research, that 2/3 of applications being created now are being done far more rapid than just a few years ago. So like the acceleration of application development has happened very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you think about it, it's organizations can't put any more hands on it, right? It's like, think of Stonehenge, right? How many hands can you put underneath a rock and you still can't lift it, right? It's the same thing. You're not going to be able to build these applications just by throwing hands at it. So AI has to kind of come into play. And if you don't have rapid ways to look through and catalog and classify those API scans, you're done. And you just open up vulnerabilities, and then your tool, to Alan, to your point, that's old tech. It's old way of doing it.
Yeah. And maybe just connect it with the John question. What do you recommend to do in before deployment? How we can more efficient test APIs? So to be honest, this is what actually we do with Pynt. We able also to integrate with QAs, and as part of the testing that is being done as functional testing, we know how to take that traffic from testing, leverage it, and create security tests upon that. So so you have few options around the world. Obviously I would say that we're doing it the best, but in general as a QA, I think it's also going there, like the non-functional testing, because it can happen along the way automatically, the security testing alongside the functionality. And this is what we do with Pynt. I hope it answered your question, John.
So let me expand on that, Svika. I just did one of these roundtables earlier this week on our DevOps Unbound show with the people from Tricentis, very big QA, automated testing. A lot of people have heard of them. The problem we have is with this whole shift left and the whole DevOps thing, right? We keep pushing stuff further left. Yeah. So we took what the QA people were doing, and they don't run tests anymore. They decide what tests to run. And then those tests are either automated, or we say, Mr. Developer, you got to run these tests, or Mr. Developer, you got to run these tests while you're developing code. But you know what? Developers like to do code. They don't like to run tests. So we're putting more on their end to do testing. The Q&A people were saying, hey, it's not enough to just do functional testing or unit testing. We want you to do security testing. A lot of them are not security pros, right? Nevertheless, we're giving them the security testing kind of role now. And now we're saying, hey, why are you doing that security testing? You should be testing for API security too. Why? We're going to make 25 hours in the day so you can do that as well. Well, there's not 25 hours in the day. There's only 24, and they got to sleep. We've got to figure out a better way to automate this using whether it's AI or maybe it's Pynt has figured out a special sauce, right? But who does this API testing? I think Jan did a follow-up here. Would it be better to test security than the QAs? What group should do that?
Yeah. So just John, for your following question, I meant that you are doing an API functional test, and we leverage that regular functional test that you're doing to make sure the API is working properly for functional, and we able to transform it to security testing. So this is what I meant. I hope it helps. If not, please, someone from my team, please go in the chat and elaborate on that.
We have another question from Sharik. This is a good question. Do you see it in there?
So
answer that one.
Yeah. So Pynt, yes, Pynt, the sweet spot of integration of Pynt is the CI/CD. It's an active solution that doing actual real world attacks. I wouldn't say it's like an IDS, because usually an IDS is intrusion detection system, which is more deployed on the production on the production environment that serves the customers. So we are doing kind of an IDS in terms that we are analyze the traffic and build like the API anatomy, and from that we're building the attacks. We're able also to do it from production, but we're focused on CI/CD, shift left.
Right, pre-deployment. Pre-deployment is a big shift there.
Yeah.
So Jan had a follow-up thing, and it's not a question, but a lot of times they won't hire a security team to test. Paul, You must have numbers on this. Go ahead, man.
Absolutely. No, this is I was chomping at the bit when I saw that one come up in the chat, because I was thinking like, hey, we just, we've done this trending data for 22, 23 and 24, and what we're seeing for this is where organizations are really starting to pivot. And that question is a great question, because what we saw was in our testing question, we found that in 2022, we found that only 29% of organizations were doing testing within API testing and functional testing in their organization. And they were really kind of pushing that testing to the field. They were saying like, look, our applications get released and we do sprint releases and all this stuff happens. So that gets published, right? But that's a problem, because obviously, as we all know, that if you have a bad user experience, you pretty much bounce from the application, you're gone, right? So what we found in 23 was that number went from 29% to 66%. And so basically they found that doing QA testing in the field was not the answer, right? But bringing back, and one of the response was, we also asked on that same survey where organizations are going to be spending their money in the next 12 to 18 months, and it was to hire resources to focus in on security testing. So that question came up in the chat, and I'm like, that is exactly what our research was to kind of uncover and find. But I also agree, Alan, and what Pynt is doing here is, it's not necessarily about bodies. It's about the automation. It's about the process flow to make things work, so you can make it really more streamlined. Because again, there's that complete elevation of applications that are being developed. I don't know how we're as organizations are going to keep developing them that fast and be able to test that rapidly without having automation in play.
Absolutely. Hey, we've got a Q&A question, and I always like to bring those up to the front here. So again, for the panel, Lynn asks, are there any best practices or standards for implementing strong authentication mechanisms and access controls across API endpoints? Speaker, you're my API. You're the API.
There is a lot of API best practices and standards from implementing, and some of them has some templates, etc. The point is with security, with APIs, it's a lot of APIs connecting to each other, talking to each other. So, by the way, the most common problem we see is kind of with no authentication, or why? Because the developer trusts the other developer in that API that he will do the test there, and the other one trusts the other one that he will do the test there. So I think that there are a lot of best practices in general in AppSec, not just in APIs, that you'll be almost 100% secured. But the problem with that you'll not be able to develop some advanced stuff if you put everything like in template in box, so you can have like a very maximized security, but almost no software and no capabilities. So yes, there are a lot of best practices, but I think even if you have the best practices, right? Even let's say you have the best, I know you have like very good gate and surveillance camera in your home, you still lock in the door, right? Right? You need to make sure you lock the door, and this is our approach.
Agreed. I like to give preference to the questions from the audience. Sierra asks, what about threat modeling? Right? How does that play into the API security kind of universe, if you will? Krista, Paul, Zvika, anybody on that one?
Krista, you want to? I can take it.
Zvika, you're the expert here. They're analysts.
No. In general, threat modeling is a practice you can implement, all over. You want to make sure you do like a threat modeling, you understand the actual threats, and you focus your solution and you focus your efforts, and after you did the threat modeling. So threat modeling, it's good to do anyway, right? The thing is, with all of this best practices and threat modeling and authentication authorization and other standards, the way you write a pair, etc., there are always a gaps, always a gaps. This is why it's important, nevertheless, of whatever you already have, it's important to really test for security. And the whole point, and this is what we're doing in Pynt, is to make it very easy for the organization to test it for very advanced security. And I think if we get to that point, where security is really part of the development process and it's easy to run and it's automated, I think this will be the main change. It's like, I would say, back then we just developed, and someday we decided we're doing like stub tests and unit testing, right? It wasn't like before. It took a while. So also with security, like we see the transition of security really, shifting left, and because, by the way, threat modeling and etc., all the others, because there's so many issues in the organization and so many developers developing API on daily basis, but we have like 4 to 5 people in the security team, so they trying to do all day prioritization. They work on prioritization. Uh, um, so threat modeling is really going that part, but I think threat modeling is very, very important for your question, and should be part of the design for the right security.
Yeah,
Go
I'll
ahead.
just add in one little piece into that, and I agree with everything you're talking about. The thing that I see with threat modeling is it really is depending on the maturity and the maturity practices within organizations, right? And the way threat modeling is built out, and again, I'm looking at this from a developer's perspective, from a DevOps perspective, right? It really fits within each stage of the CI/CD pipeline. So if you're analyzing and you're identifying those security objects, and then you start analyzing the applications, and you see the different pieces, it's where you investing the tech stack in injecting it into that CI/CD process. In my opinion, those two things need to come together. If they don't come together, it's going to be siloed in a sense, and it opens up an opportunity for things to break. And I think that if you combine those things together, where again, to earlier we were talking about shifting left, if you combine threat modeling with the CI/CD pipeline, then you start having that working in harmony. Just as kind of an opinion, and that's a utopian view of the world, right? I mean, that's what we love to get to, but it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. Another question here is, why is SAST and DAST scanning not applicable? Well, I'll let the rest of the panel chime in, but let me lead off on that one. It goes back to what I said before, the right tool for the job. SAST scanning has an absolute place. It's static vulnerability testing, right, of your code. DAST, dynamic vulnerability testing of your code. But it's not really designed to test API calls. It's not really designed to test what your API settings are, right? Is what's allowed and not allowed. Now, maybe you could write specialized scans, with APIs in mind, but for the most part, there's SAST, there's DAST, there's SCA, software composition analysis, there's ISAST. Everybody has their own little thing, but it's the wrong tool for this job. If I got it wrong, or you want to comment,
Yeah, you got it right. I can elaborate. You got it perfectly right. I can elaborate a bit. So let's talk about those categories that also for our audience to what are those words. SAST is the static application security testing. SCA is software composition analysis. Both of them based on static analysis when we look on code, on configuration. Like an essay, like words, and try to understand what are the issues, what could be the potential issues for SEA specifically. Oh, I'm using this third party. I want to make sure that I don't have any CVE, common vulnerability, on this one, etc. Thus is the dynamic application security testing, and this is physics. Whatever is not static is dynamic, right? So it means dynamic versus SAST. It means that you have an application that is live somewhere and it's interacting with you. By the way, the fourth one, which you just mentioned, like IAST, is like the interactive application security testing, is something that is like a bit going away from the world. It's too complex. It's a bit going away from the world. So if we talk about the SAST. So the main problem with SAST that you don't have the context. You're looking on the words, you're looking on the sentences of the code, but you don't have the context. And the issue is with API, with modern API development, that when we move from monolith development to microservices, and all the audience here are very, much very familiar with DevOps and then transition from monolith to microservices, also talking to them to themselves, interact by communicate by using APIs. Um, so this is on the one hand increased really the APIs in the world, but on the other hand, created less visibility in the code because most of the time the API is being built outside the actual code when we're looking to do SaaS. So it doesn't have context. You don't see the API there. Um, the thing is with Dust, so Dust is dynamic, but as Alan mentioned, Dust is very, it's a kind of like a fuzzing, focused on web, very web, like you need the actual web page and buttons, etc. Focus more on front end issues, the website rather, the back end issues or the APIs. And again, it doesn't have the context. It runs for a very, very long time. um, so what we did in Pynt, it's actually, I would say, like we're more of something similar more to a Dust because we're doing dynamic application security testing, but we don't consider ourselves usually as a Dust because Dust has some is tied to some bad characteristic. I would say it's long. You cannot integrate this CI/CD, etc. Um, what we're doing in Pynt, we're doing kind of a dynamic application security testing, but we don't call ourselves as Dust, and when we're trying to make all the disadvantages we see of Dust, to try to overcome it and make it an advantage. For example, we in Pynt run up to a couple minutes, not a couple hours. Because we have the context, we understand the technology behind the APIs, we understand the actual for each, APIs, the endpoint, the parameter, each role of parameter, the user, etc. So all of that help us, you know, focused on finding, the critical problem really fast. And what we find is 100% because we do also have like a way that we do like a three-step verification for each finding to make sure there are no false positive and what you find in real attacks and not fuzzing. It's like I would say it's like exploitable, and fuzzing, just for us to understand what it means fuzzing. Like let's take you take like, I don't know, like a machine gun, you shoot the whole room. Sometimes you shoot the wrong people. Sometimes you miss the people you wanted. So I think what we in general, the traditional SAST and Dust, they don't even claim to solve API security because the main thing, they don't have the concept, they're not friendly enough and intelligent currently to deal with really testing business logic issues really, really near the development phase. Krista, if you want to add anything.
No, I mean, I think you gave some really great details and, basically summarized what I was going to call out, which is really, like you mentioned, kind of having the context into the vulnerabilities specific to APIs, right? That's kind of one key issue that we look at. I think that really, if I were to summarize, that really is why we need a tool like Pynt that is kind of looking, again, specifically for those vulnerabilities that exist within the API itself.
Yeah,
Hey, Paul, I'm sorry, again.
Maybe just to add to another question by Joel, on Postman.
Postman and Playwright. Paul wrote a little bit of a response right in there.
Oh, okay. So
but if you want to elaborate, I think that was pretty good, Paul. Jump in it, but
okay, no, very good response. I just want to shoot out for Postman. We are the most number one popular integration within Postman today for security. So the thing with Postman, very popular tool to test APIs, but not for security. So in the click of a button, we add the security testing on top of what you already do with Postman. By the way, in the actual Postman application. John, I would say, like, I would suggest if you use Postman, so I would suggest to explore Pynt and see if it gives you. We also have a free tier up to 5 endpoints. So I suggest you can explore it and see if it provide you good value. And if you're not, obviously, we'll happy to hear, or if you and support that.
Yeah, it is a best of both worlds type of scenario here. This is kind of what I was alluding to in the CI/CD pipeline and converging with the security elements. If you're building an application and you're testing the connectivity, cool, right? Integration works, but you don't know if there's vulnerabilities. And I'm not echoing what we just already said. Those vulnerabilities are really what's going to cause you to slow down. It's going to cause your applications to break. That's what you need to be focused on but obviously you need to check to make sure the connection works, right? So you need that tech stack in order for it to work properly together.
Guys, we're moving along and we only have a few minutes, maybe another 5-10 minutes left. I wanted to touch on another area. And again, thank you, audience. These are great questions. There's some great comments coming out here. API security for me really went mainstream, if you will, when we saw OWASP come out with their top 10 API security vulnerabilities. And our audience is, I'm sure it's OWASP familiar enough to know that, they've been doing the OWASP top 10 AppSec vulnerabilities for about 15 or more years now. In fact, a lot of people complain that they don't change those vulnerabilities year to year to year. They seem pretty static, no pun intended. But, I think it was 2 years ago, they came out with an API security top 10, which at least recognized that there is this issue, right? We know, this is a big issue.
Yeah, to be honest, it's go a bit way back. It's like goes 2019, 2020.
Is it 5 years already? Okay, maybe I was ignoring it the first time.
Yeah, the new edition that happened lately. Yeah.
So now I know, Speaker, you guys have done a little of your own research, and to put that in context, I don't know if we didn't really get into it because I didn't want to make this a Pynt commercial, but you have a free version of the product that literally thousands and thousands of people are using. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's more than correct. And if we'll talk about, it's not like a Pynt commercial, but let's talk about the OWASP top 10. So OWASP top 10 come and defines the top 10 categories that we should be worried about in AppSec in general, in web, or in API security specifically in this case. And the categories, like each category, has its own big world. So what we did in Pynt when we have tens of thousands of users, so we are able actually to see what's really going on in the field today, in the wild, versus OWASP top 10 that all my friends are from OWASP, and this is the I think this is the one of the best, the organization that drive and still driving and drove and still driving the ecosystem of what we are right now, cybersecurity vendors, etc. They're doing a phenomenal job. But on the top 10, it's more of, it wasn't based on data. It was based more on, that's like a round tables. So we came with data, and for example, we saw some misalignment, what we see in the field and what was said. For example, they remove injection, which injection can be called injection, SQL injection, OSQL injection, etc. is one of the most popular issues we have today, and it's off the list in OWASP. Okay, so if someone take that list and want to prepare like an API security program, they would not take that into consideration. So this is one research we did. Obviously, happy to share it after, like comparing OWASP top 10 to what's happens in real life. And yes, we have a free tier up to 5 APIs. You can explore Pynt and see what's going on there. Any other question on that?
I don't see anything out here, but you know what? I would just mention that there is available on the Pynt site for people who want to get that report. They can dive in there and scroll.
Yeah, by the way, we just finalized another report that is a kind of a and I would say, like, my bet, like, APIs are going to be, it's not a bet, it's like a fact, it's going to be much more wild with the rise of LLM, because in the end, LLMs are APIs. And when you, as an application, a person, or another LLM want to reach out to an LLM, you use APIs. So we have also, by the way, a research we just released a couple days ago about that. And we can also see, like, we have December, January, February, March, and you can see the ongoing, the rising trend of using regular LLM APIs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of there, and the problem is getting bigger, and it's really expanding right now. The problem with API security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Go
this
ahead.
is, this is a growing part, right? I kind of made a pseudo joke in the comment about, like, for the tools that are out there, look at Pynt, right? But I also think because this is, such an emerging market right now that, I'm sure that you want feedback to say, like, hey, is things working? Especially with the LLM space, right? It's like it's changing so rapidly, so fast that business needs have to adjust based on those needs, right? So I'm sure that feedback, and it needs to be two-way, right? To understand what's happening, how are businesses using these security, exposing these security vulnerabilities, and how do you fix it? Right? How do you fix it? How do you address it? So it's definitely a business concern, and the use case is real.
Agreed.
Yeah, and just one other, because I'm an analyst, I do this, right?
Go.
We have use cases, right? And we see that 63% of definitions for cyber use cases around APIs, they want to use their cybersecurity stories in their agile software development processes, right? So we see that 63% of respondents in a sub 400 person survey are looking to do just that, right? So they're trying to put these use cases in play to make sure that things are working.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Paul. Guys, we're coming up on the top of the hour here shortly. I wanted to take care of some housekeeping if I could. First of all, if you go to the handouts section in your big market communication panel, that's to the far right, you'll see chat, then there's QA, handouts. There's a bunch of good stuff there. There's 3 reports that we spoke about on LLMs and OWASP Top 10, as well as API security testing on autopilot. Those are Pynt reports. They're giving you the preview, and you can download them right there from the handouts. And then lastly, it's 1 minute or less survey. We like to understand what you liked or didn't like, what we can do better, how we can make these roundtables more interesting, interactive, valuable to you. So take a minute to take that survey, because that's kind of guides us on what we need to do to make these better all the time, and it's something we always look on. Cody on our back end has put that survey link right into the chat. You can click on it there. And again, I don't want to be begging, but guys, I can't tell you how valuable that is to us, because we want to make these as best as they can be, but we need to understand what you want to see out of them. One of the things, for instance, is you didn't see any slides here, right? We get people don't want to watch slideware. They want to hear real give and take. They want, in interactive kind of give and take, and that's what we try to do. Guys, with our last minute or two left here, I wanted to give, we have a couple more than a minute or two, but I wanted to give each of you a chance to just wrap up. Krista, I'm going to go to you first. If you just want to leave, what do you want to leave people with around API security?
Yeah, I think between, just kind of some data and some contextual stories, I think we've really kind of painted the picture around the issue here of, API securities, their vulnerabilities. Svika kind of mentioned it's only going to continue to get worse as we lean more on large language models. So I think that would be kind of point number 1. And then point number 2 being, Alan, I loved how you described, you can't fight the current war with the last war's technology. When we think about the cybersecurity tool set, there's going to be a number of solutions that come to the table. There's no true silver bullet, but when we look at API security in particular, that's where we really do need a new approach. And that's why, I think we're all kind of on the line here today with Pynt, right? Because I think we see what Pynt is kind of bringing to the table, and we see that it really can be effective from this standpoint.
Thank you, Krista. Paul, how about you?
Yeah, well, first off, I want to thank the audience for attending, and I also want to thank Pine for the opportunity to have the conversation with us today. This is really important to the audience. It's really important to the industry. The thing I like to kind of couple of key takeaways. I want to echo what Krista said with regards to fighting the war with the right tools, right? And that's a really important takeaway. I think modernization is a key part of my practice, and modernization is definitely something that you need to be on top of. With that said, it's incredibly important to provide that feedback to the vendors that you're working with. The other thing I would highlight just very clearly, there's often a desire to do this yourself and try to build it yourself and try to go through this process but a lot of times what I see is organizations are not in the business to do this. They're in the business to run their business, whether it's banking or retail or finance, whatever they're doing. They're not in the business of building APIs, right? Or building those security checkers. And the devil's in the details. So just make sure you understand fully what you're getting into and consult with companies like Pynt and make sure that you have what you need in order to be successful. But great session today.
Thank you, Paul. Speaker, how about you?
Yeah, so let me start by agreeing with everyone here, around this virtual table, and I want to start, by thanking you, Paul, Krista, and Ellen for having me today. It was a pleasure, and the times go very, very fast. And maybe few main points, before we leave the discussion. Even let's leave it just in 2 points. One, API is not just a trend; it's not just a hype, and specifically also API security. The problem out there, most of the attacks, most of the hackers that hack in via APIs, 99.9% goes under the radar. We don't know about it. It's everywhere. It's all the time. Wherever there's money, there will be hacking. If there was software, there will be hacking. The hackers are trying to hack the APIs. So I think take a minute, not a minute, take at least a big session a week and find with your team what is our API security strategy, what we do today, and how we full. And if we don't want to, just put like a bandit somewhere, like how we do it like very elegantly from the beginning. Because by a lot of the organizations that are talking today that has very vast interest in API security but don't have tools, they doing a lot of manual work, a lot of manual. So I think that don't neglect this problem, and don't leave it manual, because it will not scale. Not even if it scale now manually, it will not scale in 2 months from now. The world is really advancing really fast. And the second, always prefer vaccine is more effective than medicine. The medicine is after the fact, when you already got sick, when you already got vulnerability. So the same as lock in the house. So everybody will agree that we want to test security in the development process and do everything. But what does it take? It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time, etc. But try to choose tools and processes that does it very elegantly and easy, but doesn't compromise don't compromise on security. And there are obviously processes and tools like that, and will save enormous time. And as sooner as you do that, and all the organization will adopt it, and you'll be able to deploy faster, which is the main goal of any engineering organization, right? Deploy the code, right? When we develop,
Faster
we
and better.
spend money. When we deploy, we want to earn money, right? So we want to shorten that time, and security sometimes is in our throat, and we need to overcome it. So I think this is my two main message. And again, Appreciate your time and the discussion. I I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you for the audience, for making it all over the world.
They make this. I told you this format runs on them. I'll leave you with this. I was 8 years ago. I was at CA World. This was before CA got bought by Broadcom. And it was the first time I heard the phrase the API economy, that the whole economy was going to be running on APIs. And I thought they were crazy back then. But as I sit here today, they were visionaries. We live in an API economy. And if you're not securing your APIs, you got trouble. I'll leave you with that. Check out Pynt, pynt.io, right? Speaker, Paul, Krista, thank you all. Thank you all very much to our audience. We'll see you at the next Tech Strong Learning. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And thank you, Cody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.